When I had just come of age, I took a knife for the crown prince, saving his life. The emperor, overjoyed, bestowed a marriage upon me and asked for my name. My father eagerly stepped forward, Gongxing and proud, bowing slightly. Your Majesty, this is my younger daughter, Rosalie. And just like that, Rosalie took my place and married the crown prince. I, on the other hand, was married to the unfavored second prince. On their wedding night, the crown prince went to his beloved concubine. Rosalie was left alone, becoming the laughingstock of the palace. But I, on my wedding night, became pregnant with the dynasty's first royal grandson. A year later, the crown prince died under mysterious circumstances. Rosalie climbed into the old emperor's bed, drove the empress to her death from anger, and was thrown into the cold palace. With the crown prince gone and a grandson to his name, the second prince gained much of the emperor's favor. When the barbarians invaded, the second prince led the troops to victory, earning him the title of crown prince, and I became the universally praised and virtuous crown princess. On the day he ascended the throne, as the empress, I pardoned my sister in the cold palace at my father's tearful request. When we met again, her face was worn, her eyes filled with a cold light. Why are you the empress? I am the one chosen by destiny. With that, she lunged at me without a moment's hesitation, a dagger plunging toward my heart. As blood gushed forth, I used my last ounce of strength to push her off the city wall. But my husband, who had shielded me, whispered in my ear, "My dear Empress, have a safe journey." When I opened my eyes again, it was to my family plotting to steal my fortune. The legitimate daughter of the Shen family, Rosalie, was virtuous and talented. She had risked her life to save the crown prince. A meritorious deed. She was to be betrothed to the crown prince. The illegitimate daughter, Alara, was to be betrothed to the second prince. One knife wound had resulted in 2 marriages. My father was overjoyed holding the imperial edict. It was my life I had risked for this marriage. Yet my father planned for Rosalie to switch places with me, hoping she would become the mother of the nation. "Father, I won't switch. I will marry the second prince." Rosalie suddenly shouted. So, she had been reborn too. In my previous life, my father and stepmother had made me switch identities with my sister, causing me to marry the incompetent second prince and ultimately die a tragic death at her hands. Returning for a second life, I would reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. Nonsense. The crown prince is the empress's son. Marrying him means you will be empress, a life of luxury. The second prince is the son of a palace maid, already out of favor. Marrying him will only lead to mistreatment and a life of hardship. My father and stepmother couldn't bear for Rosalie to suffer and scolded her harshly. But in my previous life, when it was my turn to marry the second prince, they had said, "Marrying the second prince is already a great honor for you. You grew up in the countryside. Your character is not fit for the crown prince. Unlike Rosalie, who is a talented scholar. Father, the crown prince is frail and sickly. If Alara hadn't saved him, he wouldn't be alive today. The second prince may be out of favor, but he is still the emperor's son, and could one day inherit the throne." Rosalie whispered in her mother's ear. My stepmother's face turned shades of red and white. She bit her lip, as if having made a decision, and then turned to whisper in my father's ear. I watched them whisper, calmly finishing a pot of tea. The matter was put on hold because of Rosalie. Sometime later, a flood did indeed break out in Qingzhou. My father, having listened to Rosalie, had made preparations in advance and mitigated the disaster. Not only did he prevent the people from being displaced, but he also earned the emperor's praise. He was promoted to duke, and my stepmother became a first Dan rank lady. They were now even more convinced of Rosalie's prophecies. My father brought up the marriage swap again. He said, "Alara, you will marry the crown prince. Do not forget you are using Rosalie's name. Do not reveal your true identity." I nodded obediently and said calmly, "I am willing to marry the crown prince. But I want a dowry procession that stretches for 10 miles. You're asking for the moon." Your father is but a third Zan rank military official. Where would he get the silver for that? Besides, Rosalie also needs a dowry. My stepmother was furious. I wasn't surprised. She was so greedy, she would never spit out what she had already swallowed. I put down my teacup and glared at her. Then return my mother's dowry to me. If I hadn't lived through it once, I would never have known how much my mother had brought with her when she married my father. In my previous life, Rosalie had flaunted it in front of me on her wedding day, taking my mother's grand dowry and marrying the crown prince in style. My father had even told me to be magnanimous. Rosalie is marrying the crown prince. We must show respect to the royal family. But when it was my turn to marry the crown prince, there was nothing. My stepmother was shocked. How did you know? My maternal grandfather was an imperial merchant. His daughter's dowry was far beyond what the daughter of a mere county magistrate could compare to. You know what is in the storeroom? I looked at my father with displeasure. He avoided my gaze and didn't deny it. Just tried to smooth things over. You must consider your sister. My eyes were firm. I threatened. Or shall I inform the emperor that it was I who took the knife? Not Rosalie. What do you think of that? My father's true colors finally showed. He was furious. Are you trying to get yourself killed? If you betray us, you won't escape either. At worst, we'll all go down together. In my past life, I had always clung to that sliver of fatherly affection. Always believed he loved me. It was only later that I realized it was just one instance of exploitation after another. I spoke calmly. Perhaps seeing my resolve, or perhaps plotting how to deal with me, they were silent for a long time. Finally, Rosalie spoke magnanimously. Father, mother, just give her the dowry. I am to be the empress in the future. I don't need that little bit to be the empress. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then thank you, dear sister. Rosalie looked at me with displeasure and sneered. Let me tell you, Alara, marrying the crown prince is no great fortune. He has a woman he loves. You will never have his favor. I thought to myself, it is still better than the second prince, that freeloading snake who bites the hand that feeds him. If Rosalie knew that the second prince, besides his looks, was a complete incompetent, she certainly wouldn't be smiling. In my past life, if I hadn't donned a mask and fought alongside him, how could the second prince have ever defeated the barbarians? In an era where a woman's glory was her husband's, how could her achievements outshine his? The tragedy was that I had worked so hard to build an empire for him, and in the end, he still betrayed me, dealing me the final blow. Rosalie and I were married on the same day. On my wedding day, I successfully retrieved my dowry and was married in grand style. The crown prince's betrothal gifts were truly lavish. In my past life, I had truly envied Rosalie. The gold, the silver, the jade, they were carried in by the chestful, as if they were common cabbages. This wave of wealth was finally mine for the taking. Just as in my past life, the second prince's gifts were meager. 2 chests of cheap goods, some ordinary calligraphy and simple jewelry. Being out of favor, he had little to offer. Rosalie's face turned ashen. But it was her choice to marry the second prince. Sister, there is nothing to be proud of in what your husband's family gives you. What you earn yourself is what truly matters. My stepmother chimed in. Thanks to Rosalie's wisdom, not only were your father and I promoted because of the flood, but we also made a great deal of money. You have truly brought honor to us. Rosalie was smug. My dowry, I earned it myself. Rosalie's dowry was comparable to mine. Even her wedding dress and phoenix coronet were remarkably similar. The wedding dress was made of golden silk brocade, embroidered with pearls and jade. The phoenix coronet was of golden filigree, inlaid with pearls and gemstones. Looking at it, I understood. They really did profit from that flood. But I wasn't envious at all. I was only taking what was mine. The crown prince did not come to fetch me. He was said to be still recovering and could not be overworked. I remembered that when I took the knife, he had fainted but was not injured. He can't come, or he won't. The second prince, on the other hand, arrived looking quite presentable. Rosalie was even happier. The crown prince's procession was led by military officials, his trusted aide, Julian, and palace matrons. The swaying sedan chair made me dizzy. I nearly threw up several times. Rocking and swaying, we finally arrived at the crown prince's residence, the Eastern Palace. The interior was magnificent, filled with countless rare treasures. A sweet incense burned in the inner chamber. Just sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt a sense of intoxicating bliss. The dizziness from earlier subsided. When the crown prince lifted my veil, I was still lost in the fragrance of the room, a little dazed. The crown prince was handsome, with sharp brows and starry eyes. I was not unattractive myself, with fair skin and beautiful features. The beauty mark at the corner of my right eye added a touch of allure. The crown prince and I were a decent match. We sat on the edge of the bed, and when our eyes met, he was visibly stunned. "You are Alara, not Rosalie." I was also stunned. "How did you know so quickly?" Rosalie and I were very similar in appearance. Besides the beauty mark, we were almost identical. Only our family could tell us apart. How could the crown prince recognize me at a glance? The crown prince stared at me for a few moments. Then, after some thought, he reached out and touched the beauty mark at the corner of my eye, murmuring to himself, "It is real." His warm breath was on my face. A spark of desire flickered in his eyes. I found myself anticipating his next move. The crown prince's lips curved into a smile. "Rosalie has no beauty mark at the corner of her right eye. The one with the mark is Alara." I touched my beauty mark, puzzled. How did he know this? Well, I had no intention of living under Rosalie's name anyway. I quickly knelt and said softly, "Your Highness, please forgive me. I am indeed Alara." The crown prince was not angry. He gently lifted my chin, his expression thoughtful. "The Duke, passing off a fake for the real thing. Sending his illegitimate daughter here. What is his intention?" "Your Majesty, the imperial edict was to bestow a marriage upon the legitimate daughter of the Shen family. I am indeed the legitimate daughter. My mother was the first wife, but she passed away early. My father doted on his concubine and neglected his wife, so I was sent to the countryside from a young age. By a turn of fate, I was the one who took the knife for you." I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the long, thin scar on my arm. The crown prince glanced at it coldly. "Do you know this is considered deceiving the emperor?" I shook my head and explained. "The marriage was bestowed primarily because I saved you, and it was indeed I who did so. My father gave my name. How have I deceived the emperor?" The crown prince smiled faintly. Such a sharp tongue. He was not furious, nor did he pursue the matter further. Just as I had expected, he didn't care who the crown princess was. I pressed on. "I wish to make a deal with your highness." "What kind of deal?" "I know that your highness favors the Lady Bianca, and wishes for a life with her and her alone. I am willing to cooperate unconditionally, to be the crown princess in name only. I ask for no favor, only that after you ascend the throne, you grant me my freedom." He frowned, puzzled. "Why? This man-eating palace is a place of endless struggle. After this is all over, I just want to change my identity, find a safe place, and live my life." The crown prince was silent for a long time. Seeing that he had no more questions, I breathed a sigh of relief. But he made me kneel for a long time. He just sat on the edge of the bed, studying me. 100 horses were galloping in my mind, but I didn't dare to move. My knees were screaming in protest. I am a woman after all. Couldn't you show a little compassion? After a long while, the crown prince finally said, "You may rise." He patted the spot beside him, gesturing for me to sit. I timidly sat down, my mind racing. Why hasn't he gone to see his beloved concubine yet? The crown prince grinned mischievously. "I do not agree. The Duke reported the wrong name, which is already an act of deceiving the emperor. You concealed the truth, which is also a crime. Even if you saved my life, the death penalty may be waived, but you cannot escape punishment. You have no leverage to make a deal with me. You have no choice but to be my crown princess under my protection." It was rumored that the crown prince was mediocre, That must have been a lie. The man before me was not so easily fooled. I was so shocked I couldn't speak. Why was this crown prince so different from the one in my past life? Why would your highness protect me? I was nervous and confused. This is not the crown prince I remember. The crown prince laughed heartily. Isn't it obvious because you saved me? I relaxed a little. So, he does have a conscience. Do you wish for me to stay? The crown prince asked gently. The fragrance in the room was growing stronger. I felt a strange heat, a dryness. Looking at him, he seemed to be the only thing that could quench my thirst. I moved closer, and the truth slipped out. Are you capable? After all, in my past life, the crown prince had died in his beloved's bed. I wondered if he had been exhausted to death. I quickly covered my mouth, but it was too late. The crown prince was visibly angry. His eyebrows were contorted. Well, he was frail. I shouldn't have asked. The night was short. Before I knew it, it was dawn. I think the crown prince has some interest in me. At least in terms of appearance. He is quite satisfied. I vaguely heard a matron urging us to go and serve tea. As I was getting up, the crown prince pushed me back down and said coldly, "Don't bother." I didn't dare to move. I was sleepy anyway. Half an hour later, the crown prince and I finally rode in a litter to the empress's palace. Rosalie and the second prince had been waiting at the palace gate for half an hour. But the empress was slow to summon us. When I stepped out of the litter, Rosalie was glaring at me, her teeth clenched. I understood her anger. In our past life, she had come to serve tea alone, and had been made to stand at the gate for an hour. It was the crown princess's fault for not being able to keep her husband on their wedding night. But because the second prince and I had successfully consummated our marriage, the empress had not made things difficult for us. A palace matron came out and announced that the empress was ready to see us. The empress said that procreating was now our most important duty. The crown prince was displeased. "That does not mean you can burn incense in my palace, mother." The empress smiled faintly. "Lady Bianca's constitution is not suitable for childbirth. I know you favor her, but it is your duty as crown prince to produce an heir." Rosalie and I exchanged a look. We finally understood why we had been so drawn to the crown prince. The difference was that Rosalie had been rejected, while I had succeeded. But how had Rosalie solved the problem of her wedding night in our past life? The anger in her eyes intensified, and her aura of resentment grew stronger. It must have had something to do with the second prince's 5-minute performance in bed. After all, he had long been ruined by the palace maids and eunuchs. In our past life, the imperial physician had said I was very fertile, which was how I had conceived that child. Rosalie's experience last night was probably not as she had imagined. The crown prince's reaction was mild. It wasn't that he really wanted to question the empress. "My imperial brother is truly blessed. I am no match," the second prince said unexpectedly. He rarely spoke his mind. The crown prince sneered. "And how was your night, my dear brother?" The second prince gave a weak smile and looked at Rosalie. Alara was very enthusiastic. Rosalie actually blushed and covered her face with a handkerchief. The empress looked at the proof of consummation and was overjoyed. The emperor is eager for an heir. The imperial astronomer has said that a daughter of the Shen family has the aura of a phoenix and is destined to give birth to a dragon. You two must work hard. I will be waiting for good news. No wonder I had been so lucky in the palace in my past life. It was all thanks to my fertile womb. I wonder if Rosalie will have the same good fortune. The empress had us stay for a meal. The palace cuisine was delicious. I was halfway through, enjoying myself, when Rosalie suddenly stood up. "I wish to entertain your majesty with a song and dance I have choreographed myself." Rosalie had a beautiful singing voice, like a nightingale, and her dancing was captivating. But I could barely hold on to my chopsticks. I wanted to throw them at her. What is she doing? Is she afraid people don't know she is Rosalie? The empress praised her. "I never knew Alara was so talented in song and dance," Rosalie said shyly. "My sister is even better." She looked at me deliberately. "Isn't that right, sister?" I was busy with a pork knuckle and was a little annoyed, so she is trying to make a fool of me. But Rosalie's little scheme was wasted on me. I wouldn't fall for it, I answered truthfully. I only enjoy wielding a sword. I am not skilled in music or dance. The second prince laughed. Everyone says Rosalie is the most beautiful and talented woman in the kingdom. How could you not be? I have heard that Alara is skilled in martial arts. Could it be that you are not Rosalie? I thought to myself. He is being so direct. Could he have also realized that Rosalie is not Alara? The crown prince stood up without hesitation. I have something to report. The brides were swapped last night. My crown princess is Alara, not Rosalie. He was so blunt, completely disregarding my safety. I put down my pork knuckle, walked to the front of the hall, and knelt. Following his lead, I said, on our wedding day, my sister and I were dressed very similarly. I nearly tripped before leaving, and in the confusion, my sister and I must have switched places. The Empress was furious, slamming her hand on the table. If the brides were swapped, why didn't you switch them back immediately? And you both consummated the marriages. Rosalie, the second prince, and I all knelt, not daring to speak. And whose fault is that, mother? The aphrodisiac incense was so strong. After the deed was done, we only realized the brides were swapped when we woke up. The crown prince was unapologetic, showing no regard for the Empress's dignity. I had thought he was complaining to the Empress, but it turned out he was setting a trap for her, to clear my name. This crown prince was truly intelligent. Last night, in the heat of the moment, he had only told me to cooperate with him, to just be myself. The Empress's imposing manner softened. She seemed a little embarrassed. She probably hadn't expected her good intentions to backfire. She sighed. Since things are as they are, let it be. I will report this to the Emperor. From this day on, the crown princess is Alara. I was overjoyed and kowtowed heavily. Thank you for your mercy, your majesty. Rosalie's little trick had backfired. She had been terrified just a moment ago, but she was also happy, relieved that she wouldn't have to use Alara's name, and she could still dream of becoming empress. And just like that, Rosalie and I easily reclaimed our own identities. Tomorrow, when I returned home for the customary visit, I would no longer be Rosalie. When it was time for the customary bridal visit home, the crown prince said he was busy and couldn't accompany me. He had Julian go with me, bearing lavish gifts. Rosalie was standing at the gate. Seeing me arrive alone, she laughed so hard she doubled over. Sister, has the crown prince already abandoned you? I walked past her, ignoring her. Julian, take the gifts to my father. Seeing the lavish gifts Julian was carrying, Rosalie's teeth ground with envy. Alara, don't be so smug. I went straight to the ancestral hall, leaving her to talk to herself. I knelt before my mother's memorial tablet and thanked her for giving me life. Rosalie stormed in, took down my mother's tablet, threw it to the ground, and stomped on it, her expression triumphant. You won't be crown princess for long. No need to inform the concubines. I furiously snatched the tablet from under her feet, my hands scratched and bleeding. When I looked at the tablet, I saw that the inscription, "My beloved wife," had been changed to concubine. I angrily demanded of my father. What is the meaning of this? My father was unapologetic. Rosalie is to be the empress. She needs the status of a legitimate daughter. You won't be crown princess for long anyway. What does it matter if you accommodate your sister? I was furious, my heart cold. I drew Julian's sword, cut off a piece of my sleeve, and said with despair, Tode, I sever all ties. From this day on, I have no connection to the Shen family. No one expected the crown prince to arrive at that moment with an imperial edict. The duke sold information about the flood to grain merchants in advance, causing rice prices to soar, and profited from it. This is a violation of his official duties, and has caused great suffering to the people. The evidence is conclusive, and his crime is unpardonable. However, in consideration of his merits in disaster relief, the Shen couple's property is to be confiscated, and they are to be exiled to the northern wilderness. My father and stepmother wept and knelt, begging me to plead for them. I looked down, feigning tears, and covered my mouth with a handkerchief, my tone merciless. I have already severed ties with them. My stepmother turned to Rosalie, clutching her hand, her voice pitiful. Rosalie, help your mother, please. I don't want to be exiled. Rosalie hesitated and looked at the second prince. The second prince slapped her hand away with disgust. Rosalie, your parents are beyond saving. The emperor already dislikes me. Pleading for them will only get us implicated. Rosalie was hesitant, but afraid of being implicated. She didn't dare to speak. She quickly followed the second prince and fled. I asked the crown prince, "How did you know my father was selling information?" He was so discreet. He said, "The investigation started a while ago. We just didn't expect the person who profited from the disaster and the person who saved it to be one and the same. Yesterday, when you mentioned that your and Rosalie's wedding dresses were similar, I grew suspicious. Your dress was custom handmade, not the same as hers. The jade and pearls on it were particularly valuable, not something the Duke could afford on his salary. To alter a dress to be so similar would require a lot of silver, so I had it investigated." I was surprised that he had understood my hidden meaning. It was late when we returned to the Eastern Palace. As we stepped inside, a palace maid rushed over. "Your Highness, you have not visited my lady for 3 days. She misses you so much that she has lost her appetite and has been bedridden for days. Please, go see her." The crown prince's expression didn't change. Lady Bianca was the apple of his eye. I thought he would surely go to her, so I started to walk away. "I am tired. I will retire for the night." As I turned, the crown prince took my hand. "Where are you going, my dear?" I was confused. "I'm going to my room to sleep. Then I will go with you. Tell your mistress that if she is ill, she should see the imperial physician. I cannot cure her. My going would be of no use." The crown prince flicked his sleeve and led me away. For the next month, he stayed in my chambers every night and never once visited Lady Bianca. But everyone knew he favored her. Lady Bianca had been a palace maid. To marry her, he had knelt outside the Empress's chambers for a day and a night, finally securing the title of concubine for her. But now, had he transferred his affections to me? I was grinding ink, lost in thought, and didn't notice his approach. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder, and kissed me gently. "What are you thinking about? My love, you're so lost in thought." I was startled. How could he be so forward? This was the study, not a place for such behavior. My personal maid, Lily, came to report. "Lady Bianca has attempted to take her own life, please. Your Highness, go see her." I quickly pushed him away and said tentatively, "Your Highness, perhaps you should go." The crown prince's mood soured. He scowled. "No, if she wants to die, let her. Since I entered the Eastern Palace, you have not once visited her. If anything were to happen, the world would say I am jealous, and I would be drowned in their saliva. I am willing to go with you to see her." The crown prince was stunned for a few seconds, then said thoughtfully, "All right." He casually took my hand and called out, "Prepare the litter." Moonlight Palace. Lady Bianca was holding a white silk sash, threatening to hang herself. Maids and eunuchs surrounded her. "Let me go. I don't want to live. The crown prince doesn't want me anymore. What is the point of living?" When the crown prince and I arrived, she made an even bigger scene, kicking over a stool, waiting for him to save her. I thought he would surely rush to her side, but instead, he walked over to a chair, sat down, and watched with a detached air, as if watching a play. So I sat down beside him. Luckily, a quick-witted guard cut the sash, and she fell to the floor, her life saved. Lady Bianca cried, "How could you be so heartless, Your Highness? After only a month, you have forgotten me, and you no longer care if I live or die." She lay on the floor, pitiful, her face pale, her body weak. She was still a beauty. Even I felt a pang of pity and wanted to help her up. I thought the crown prince would surely move now. Lady Bianca must have thought so too. She held out her hand and cried, "Your Highness, Have you forgotten our vows? But the crown prince only glanced at her coolly and called out, "Bring him in." I almost laughed out loud, but managed to stifle it. This isn't a play. It is a matter of life and death. The crown prince's men brought in a man and forced him to his knees. He was dressed in strange clothes with a sharp face and thin lips. He did not look like a good person. He glanced at Lady Bianca on the floor and then quickly looked away. I guess there was a story there. The crown prince took a small, exquisite box from his waist, slowly opened it, and showed it to the man. "What is this? Do you recognize it?" The man glanced at it, and then lowered his head in silence. "Lady Bianca, what do you say?" The crown prince turned the box toward her. She was clearly guilty, her eyes darting around. She whispered, clutching her heart, "I do not recognize that disgusting insect." I curiously peeked over. It is a dead insect. It is quite disgusting and it stinks. I couldn't help but retch. "Are you all right, my dear?" The crown prince slammed the box on the ground in front of the man, and then came to my side, gently patting my back. "Schuld, I call the imperial physician." I waved my hand. "No, I'm fine." Perhaps seeing my discomfort, he gave me a warm smile. My heart fluttered. "Then I will be quick." He returned to his cold demeanor and pointed to the box on the floor. "Lady Bianca, this is the love Dan curse you placed on me. You used this curse to control me and force me to make you my concubine. And I know what your childhood sweetheart has been doing. You can't deny it. The proof is on your body. A love Dan curse usually has two parts, a male and a female. If the male dies, the female cannot live. If the female is not removed from her body, her life is in danger. I think, in my past life, the crown prince's early death was probably due to this curse. I heard that Lady Bianca had his favor every night. Could it be that he died of exhaustion? After all, he was frail. But on our wedding night, he seemed to have plenty of energy. Lady Bianca deflated like a popped balloon. But the man perked up. He begged. It was all her doing. I was just following orders. "Your Highness, please spare my life." Lady Bianca was furious and slapped him hard across the face. "When you were lusting after my body, was that my order too? Serving two masters?" "How disgusting," I said, looking at the crown prince with disgust and instinctively moving away. The crown prince quickly explained, "I never touched her, really." The Moonlight Palace instantly turned into a chaotic scene. Lady Bianca and her childhood sweetheart started fighting. Guards rushed in to pull them apart. The crown prince quickly shielded me and left, leaving the matter to his trusted aide, Julian. He only said, "Take them to the dungeon for now and await my orders." When the crown prince and I returned to my chambers, the imperial physicians were already waiting. Taking my pulse was a formality. With the experience of my past life, I knew. I was simply pregnant. I touched my belly and thought, I've given him a new father in this life. I wonder if he will be the same as before. In my last life, I only met him once. I went to war right after giving birth and had no time to raise him. And then, I died. I feel so guilty. "I will be a good mother in this life," the imperial physician announced. "It is a happy pulse." The crown prince was overjoyed and showered my chambers with rewards. The empress found out and showered my chambers with rewards. The emperor was delighted and showered my chambers with rewards. It was as if the child had nothing to do with me and the crown prince, but belonged to my chambers. The news of the rewards quickly reached the second prince's palace. Rosalie was furious, throwing things and hitting her stomach. "Why are you so useless? Is it really just the stomach that is the problem?" The second prince was busy trying to catch the things she was throwing. When an antique vase shattered, he was heartbroken. It was one of the few valuable things in his palace. He finally snapped, "Stop." Rosalie glared at him. "What, am I not allowed to?" The second prince immediately backed down. "You are, but not here. What if your sister were to accidentally break something?" He didn't finish, but Rosalie understood. She smiled. The second prince thought to himself, "This is what all the ladies in the palace do. I've heard it 1,000,000 times. I don't need a brain for this, as long as you understand." It rained for a long time this month. When it finally cleared, it was the day the crown prince was to meet with the barbarian envoys. But Rosalie and the empress came to my chambers early in the morning. Congratulations, sister, on your quick pregnancy. Rosalie's words were congratulatory, but her fingers were clenched tightly around her white dress. I watched her and the empress put on their little show. Rosalie said the peonies in the imperial garden were in full bloom. Looking at beautiful things would make the baby beautiful. The empress agreed. Even if it wasn't true, a walk would be nice. I knew a trip to the imperial garden was inevitable, and Rosalie had ill intentions. The imperial garden. The flowers were indeed beautiful. Let's rest in that pavilion. As we were walking, Rosalie pointed to a pavilion in the distance. To sit and have some tea and snacks while admiring the flowers would be lovely. The empress acquiesced. I walked carefully, supported by Lily. But as I was climbing the steps to the pavilion, I slipped. I instinctively grabbed Rosalie, who was walking in front of me. Perhaps I used too much force, or perhaps she was unsteady on her feet, but she fell forward. Lily caught me, and I managed to stay upright. But Rosalie had a real fall. Her white dress was stained with blood. Her face was pale as she cried out, "It hurts!" The empress frantically called for the imperial physician. I watched from the side, my expression cold. The imperial physician said, "Rosalie has had a miscarriage." Because it was so early, there were no obvious signs. Just as I had suspected, the moment I saw the red on her dress, I knew. Rosalie's malice had cost her her little bit of good fortune. Rosalie cried, "Alara, you did this to me!" The empress was furious. "Alara, do you admit your guilt?" I quickly knelt, about to argue. But the empress shook her head at me. She said, "The barbarian envoys are visiting today. There must be no more trouble in the palace." I obediently shut my mouth. Fine, for the sake of the child. The empress sentenced me to a month of confinement in my chambers, as a sort of apology to Rosalie. Rosalie still seemed dissatisfied and continued to cry. The empress told me to go back and rest, so as not to upset Rosalie further. I obeyed. I was tired of listening to her anyway. When I returned to my chambers, the crown prince had not yet returned. I heard that his meeting with the barbarian envoys had not gone smoothly. I knew that a war with the barbarians was imminent. Confined to my chambers with nothing to do, I began to embroider a sachet. "My lady, why didn't you say anything?" Lily asked, bringing me a needle and thread, her voice indignant. "The soles of your shoes were clearly waxed." I was calm. "Have you found out who did it?" Lily was furious. It was the new palace maid, Sui. She was almost silenced, so she confessed everything. "The second princess is a monster. She deserves to lose her child." I was not angry. I continued with my embroidery. "Keep Sui for now. Give her food, drink, and shelter. Let the world think she is dead." "Understood, my lady." "It is late. Let me help you prepare for bed." I nodded, and put down the sachet I had just finished. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. I was craving something to eat. As I tossed and turned, I vaguely heard a window open. The shadow behind the bed curtains grew clearer. The intruder was getting closer. I pulled out the dagger I had hidden under my pillow, hid to the side, and prepared for a fight. As a large hand gently lifted the curtain, I kicked him in the chest and lunged with my dagger. "It is me," a familiar male voice, with a slight cough. Cough. "You're ruthless! That kick! Not even a military general has your skill!" I lit a lantern and saw the intruder's face. I was speechless. "Your Highness, why did you climb through the window instead of using the door? Why didn't the night watch announce you? The Empress has confined you." I had no choice but to climb. The crown prince slowly walked toward me. "The barbarian envoys tried to poison me. I have captured them. The barbarians are preparing for war. My father has sent me to lead the army. I leave tomorrow." I was surprised. I hadn't expected the barbarians to act so quickly and openly, and for the crown prince to be so prepared. In my past life, the crown prince had died mysteriously shortly after meeting the barbarian envoys. This crown prince was truly different. He spoke calmly, as if it had happened to someone else. Lady Bianca was used by the barbarians to place a curse on me. The envoys, seeing that I was healthy, tried to have her use another poison, but Julian caught them. Suddenly, he looked at me with a mischievous smile. I also discovered something interesting. Julian found your sister meeting with a guard in secret, and the second prince in a maid's room. I was stunned. So Rosalie's child was not the second prince's. The crown prince asked, "What do you want to do with them?" I said, "Let Julian keep them for now." I took the sachet I had just finished embroidering from under my pillow and tied it to his waist. I told him, "The secret to defeating the barbarians is hidden in here. Remember to look at it before you go into battle." He nodded and looked at me with deep affection. I thought I would have to explain myself, but he believed me without question. I asked nervously, "Why do you believe me?" He smiled. "I can read minds." I gave a fake smile, taking it as a joke, as long as he believed me. But there was one thing I didn't understand. "Do you like me?" The crown prince smiled. "You're just figuring that out?" I glared at him. "I just don't understand where all this affection is coming from." The crown prince reached out and stroked my head, his gaze indulgent. "Love at first sight, ever heard of it?" He said that in his country, it was one man, one wife, so he would be faithful to me. I gave a fake smile. "Leo, in this dynasty, it is common for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. You're clearly trying to fool me." The crown prince just smiled and said nothing. The war lasted for almost a year. Soon, news of the crown prince's great victory reached the palace. I also gave birth to a son. The emperor and empress were still alive. Rosalie had tried several times to get the second prince to go to the battlefield, but he was too incompetent. He didn't even have the skills to go to war. She couldn't cause any more trouble. The crown prince was about to return in triumph. I held my child and waited for him at the palace gate, thinking that all was well. But Rosalie suddenly appeared from behind me, a knife in her hand. She lunged at me, shouting, "In this life, I will be the empress." But the crown prince shielded me, taking the knife with his hand. He said, "Now we're even." Rosalie was brought before the emperor and empress. I had Lily release Tway and tell them what had happened. Adultery, harming a royal heir, and attempting to assassinate the crown princess. Rosalie's crimes were unpardonable. She was executed on the spot. The second prince didn't dare to say a word, but I knew he was not a harmless snake, just waiting for an opportunity. Not long after, the emperor's health failed, and he was confined to his bed. The second prince, with a group of secretly trained assassins, stormed the palace and surrounded it. I put up my hair, donned my armor, and led a group of soldiers to break through. Without my years of training, the second prince was, in this life, truly no match for me. When I plunged my sword into him, his eyes were as fierce as they had been in my past life. When he had stabbed me, the crown prince rushed over, a look of relief on his face. "This look of yours, I've read about it in books, heroic, like a powerful female protagonist." I blushed slightly and nodded at him. "I know you're just a different soul." After the crown prince ascended the throne, I became his only empress.